Welcome to the Cross Digital Podcast, where journalism meets marketing, and you learn how to hug the storms in your life. And now, here's your host, Dennis Washington.
And thanks for joining us on this edition of the Cross Digital Podcast. I'm Dennis Washington. Hope you're having a great day today. Got a good personal interview to share with you today. It's a good friend of mine, Dale Jenkins. He's the pulpit minister at Spring Meadows Church of Christ in Spring Hill, Tennessee. He and I have known each other for several years. I knew his father before I knew him. His dad was the preacher at my home congregation in Birmingham, Alabama, for almost 45 years, but certainly gotten to know Dale a lot over the years as well. In fact, he and I serve on a couple of board of directors together. I asked Dale to join me on the podcast today because there's a couple of things that he does on a regular basis that I think can be really, really useful to you. One of those is writing. You would think that, okay, a preacher, why would he write? But he writes a lot. As we talk about in this, he has a very, very specific plan for every day of the month. Basically, 25 days out of the month, he pushes himself to write a certain number of words. And it can be for the blog, it can be for a book, but he is going to have a goal of every day of writing a certain number of words and sees that through. And as a result, he's been able to publish several books. He's got more coming down the road, always producing content. So we get into that and get into his routine of a daily routine of when he likes to write. I know some of you, including myself, like to write in the morning hours. He likes to write in the afternoon hours. So we get into this, find out what he does that leads up to the afternoon hours that makes the afternoon hours so productive for him. Some of the people that inspire him, that have helped him write. One of the things he talks about in this interview is just always listening and interviewing writers to see what they do. So there's a lot to learn from that as well. And then we get into social media as the last 10 minutes of the program, the podcast today, finding out how he uses social media and the negatives and the positives with it as well, but how it helps him and the interesting times where he's learned his target audience receives his work best. He's over the years has figured out when his best published schedule is, when the best engagement is, when he publishes content, and he's got a couple of different audiences that he deals with as well, and he knows when the best published times are for each audience. So a lot of great stuff there. So but without further ado, let's get into the interview today with Dale Jenkins. And I'm joined now on the phone with Dale Jenkins. Dale, good morning to you.
Good morning. It's an honor to be on this great program. I listen to every podcast you do, and you've done a great job with Cross Digital so far, and have appreciated it. I've learned several things from it. So great to be with you.
Thank you, Dale. I appreciate that. For folks that are just joining us and may not be familiar with who you are, tell folks a little bit about yourself and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Well, I often tell people who ask that kind of question, I feel like I stumble into everything that's happened in my life. And I've been really, really fortunate, a very, very blessed person. I don't believe in luck, but I do believe in blessings, and I have been very, very blessed. Of course, a number of your listeners will know, especially those that might be in the Birmingham market, will be familiar with my dad's name, Jerry Jenkins, who you worked with some in television work and everything, and Dad was a minister at Royal Parkway for a little under 45 years, and was a good part of that work. Of course, as a result of that, I grew up in Birmingham and went to college from there, and I'm a preacher, and I sometimes like to say I'm just a preacher. That's what I do. I preach. I preach about 300 to 400 times a year. I preach as often as I can, as many times as I can. But in the process, I end up preaching to preachers a whole lot the last several years, and I work on a number of different boards of Christian organizations as a result of some of those things. And with my brother Jeff, to honor our dad, about 2 years ago, we started a little thing called the Jenkins Institute. It's at the JenkinsInstitute.com, and our tagline is serving God's servants, and we try to minister to ministers.
That's awesome. And to let my listeners know, we'll make sure we put links to your websites in the show notes today at crossdig.com. So when I reached out to you for this podcast, a couple of things I wanted to kind of talk about was social media and your book writing habits, because I know you just recently had a book come out. Let's start there with the book. Tell us a little bit about the book that just came out and how that book came about.
Okay, that's a great question. About 4 years ago, I was asked to do the introductory convocation sort of speech for Heritage Christian University over in Florence, Alabama, on whose board I serve. And it is a small Christian university that offers a 4-year liberal arts degree, but we only offer the degree in one area, and that is in the area of Bible ministry, counseling, just in the Bible field. And so as a result of that, I knew that my audience would be ministers that day. And I had a little sentence that kept going through my mind, trying to work through what I might say to these guys. And I had an idea of what I wanted to say, but then eventually the tagline became the lesson. And I started thinking, these guys are just entering into preaching training schools, seminary, our friends might say, or Bible school. And so what would I want to tell them? And I thought, they need to know a little bit about what ministry is like, the challenges, and how hard it's going to be. But I don't want them to leave and feel like it's going to be all bad. I want them to realize some good, too.
Right.
And so I wrote a sentence called Your Ministry, actually driving down the road, something you should never do. I think it's illegal to text and drive, but I don't think it's illegal to write and drive. I used a pen and paper, and I wrote out, Your Ministry will be, and I started writing stuff while I was driving. And when I got back over the next 2 or 3 days, it grew into a book, or it grew into several things, and the tagline overtook the lesson I was going to deliver, and it became a very emotional speech, Your Ministry, and I posted it online, and it kind of went a little viral, and publishing company contacted me, asked if they could publish it, and they did, and they published it under a little tag called A Minister's Heart. It sold really well, and a couple of years ago, we started talking about, I was asked to speak on another program, and it was to youth ministers. I thought, well, I'll follow that up, and I'll do something on as a youth minister, kind of the standpoint of them. And so they published the second book called A Youth Minister's Heart. Well, that's kind of turned into where we then, my brother and I, Jeff and I, wrote a little volume called A Mother's Heart, and the most recent one, A Father's Heart. And these are devotional type gift books for moms and dads, ministers and youth ministers. And so that's how those books came about.
That's awesome. And when you started this, because I think there's a lot of people out there that would love to write a book, but they don't know where to begin. They don't know. I think the whole process, once they start to think about it, beyond just the novelty of writing a book, they start to think about the details of actually doing it. It can be very intimidating. What really helped you in going from that, I need to write a book, to actually making that happen?
Boy, that is a great question. I have been, Dennis, I've been interviewing writers for 25 years now. Every writer I can find that writes a book, I basically do an unpublished interview with them and say, how do you do it? Because I love to write, but the best descriptive line I've ever heard came from my uncle, or actually a second cousin named Ansel Jenkins, and it's not a ritual to him, but he said, writing is like giving birth. Well, I've never given birth, but I think I understand what it's like. I mean, it is so painful to me to try to push this thing through and to get it through to its end. Now, I've listened. I interview a lot of writers. I talk to them. But Jeff Goins had one of the best lines I've ever seen, and it's very simple. And he just said, writers write. Writers write. And so I just try to write every day, a little bit every day. Now, Ansel, that I mentioned a minute ago, said he wrote every day. He would write one page, he would review one page, and he would finalize one page. My process is simple. I try to write 750 words 25 days a month. 25 days every month I try to write 750 words. Now, those words could be a blog, those words could be a book, those words could be a chapter in a book, or a speech I'm going to make, but my goal is 750 words a day.
750 words a day for 25 days.
25 days a month.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean I think that's very reasonable. And I guess from a time perspective, by now, I'm sure starting out 750 words on day one probably was a struggle. Now I'm guessing you could probably knock that out in less than an hour, depending on the topic.
Well, that's a good theory.
Well, all right. So, it kind of leads to my next question because there's a lot of planning that happens. I mean, I know there's a lot of inspiration in writing, and a lot of that comes from your experiences and your research as well. But when you're researching and all of that, and then starting that writing process from each day, how much time do you devote to writing each day?
Well, I guess the actual writing of the words, you're probably right. Maybe a little less than an hour. But,
Yeah.
There's the research, you say, and the experience that you have to live. And I try to write a lot, not only from, of course, I'm a minister, so from the text of the Scripture, but also from experience of life and what people are facing in life. And so I have a couple of tools that I use. I'll mention them to you, and if they're useful to your readers, good. Of course, I use Pages. I'm an Apple guy. I use Pages. I turn on word count on my page, and that, again, for me, it just kind of gives me a guideline. Hey, I've written 500 words.
Right.
I've got 250 to go. I use a little program called Full, F-U-L-L. It's just a cute little $1.99 program in the App Store, and it lets you set goals, and then it lets you chart those goals. And so one of my goals is 750 words, 25 days for the month. And every time I write 750 words, I click on it, it gives me a percentage of how far I've got to go to reach that goal for the rest of the month. That's useful for me. Another little tool I ran across that I don't like as much, but that I'm trying to like, is called Write or Die, W-R-I-T, Write or Die. And it is a prompter. If you're writing and your keyboard sits idle for more than 10 seconds, it starts flashing. For 15 seconds, it starts flashing red. For 30 seconds, a loud sound starts going off.
Oh, my goodness.
And it's to keep you moving. You moving. Now, I don't know if that's really good because sometimes you need to stop and think. But like I said, I'm trying to like it because I'd really like to be able to do it that quickly. So those are a couple of tools that I've used. But really, basically, it comes down to just a matter of every day I'm going to sit down and force myself, good, bad, or other, to write 750 words. I keep a file open on my desktop called Blog Starters and Ideas. And it basically is where I put anything that I'm writing that hasn't been published yet.
That's a really, and I'll check out the tools too, and make sure we get those linked in the show notes. When you also sit down to write, I've certainly read about other writers and their habits, their writing habits. Beside, like they have some of them have to have a certain kind of atmosphere in the room, like no music, silence, or maybe a certain kind of music playing. Or something that's happening in the background that helps them concentrate. Do you kind of have any special habits that help you write better?
That's a great question. And the interesting thing is I'm not sure that there's an answer to that. I think that may be a very individual thing.
Yeah.
Some people say you need to find different places to write where your creativity comes out. Don't be stagnant, move around, go different places. Other people say, and I know Stephen King. You didn't expect a Stephen King quote from me, did you?
Oh, you never know.
Stephen King wrote an excellent book on writing. I'm not a King fan. I'm not a horror guy. I don't like horror stories and everything. But he's a writer. And so he wrote on writing, so I've been reading it because somebody, I think George Kearns Goodwin, who's a political writer, suggested reading this book. And it was either her or Michael Hyatt, one that recommended the book. And I read it, and the language in it isn't great. Need to be clear on that. Yep. But, man, it is a good little book. And King says, you find a place, you sit in a certain chair in a certain room with certain lighting, certain music, and that's where you write, and you do that every day. Your body gets used to, your mind gets used to that environment, and it knows this is where I write. I have run across a program, and I didn't mention this one a minute ago. This is really good, called Focus at Will. Focus at Will. And Focus at Will is actually a scientific organization that how do you describe it? That they have come up with music that is designed to help you write. And you're able to kind of do some customizing things on everything. I've been using it now for about 3 weeks, and really, really like it. So that's helpful to me. Personally, most of my best writing comes when I'm, frankly, at Starbucks in the afternoon. That's when I do my best writing.
Wow. Hey, because I've heard some people talk, and you're right about everybody has their habits that are better for them. I tend to do, I think, some of my best writing in the morning hours, especially early in the morning, especially right after that first cup of coffee. But it's funny how everybody tends to I guess mentally peak at a different time of the day. Why do you feel like why do you think that the afternoon hours are better for you? Because I hear some people say by the time they get to the afternoon, their brain is spent.
Well, I do a lot of my morning stuff. I run in the morning, early morning. I run every morning. I do some prayer and meditation. I do some reading in the morning. I do some research in the morning. I make visits, and I do errands in the morning, and usually just right after lunch I head to Starbucks, and that's where I found I do my writing. I don't know if it's because I've got a lot of things checked off my big to-do list, and that's when I can focus on writing. Or if it's that the afternoon kind of beckons me, hey, it's 2 in the afternoon, you hadn't written 750 words, you better get busy.
Nothing like a little procrastination to nudge you along there.
Yeah, there you go. That's right. That's right.
Well, and I think one thing, too, is the accountability that you've set for yourself to do this. And this is one of the things I think especially entrepreneurs and people that are kind of in this for themselves sometimes struggle with, is they don't have someone over their shoulder pushing them to get something done. And I know even in your case, I mean, some of this maybe or maybe not, optional may not be the right word, but it's not something that has to get done on a certain date, on a certain deadline usually. What's the push for you to create that self-accountability? What really drives you to say, okay, I've set this deadline for myself. No one else, this deadline's not important to anyone else but me, but I'm going to stick to it. What really makes you go, not just say, oh, well, I don't have to do that today?
Well, that's another good question. And it's something I learned from Dad that was really valuable to me, has been really valuable to me. And he said, take on projects that force you to study. And I remember when he was doing, he used to do a daily radio program for Belize, for Central America, a country down in Belize. And it was something he didn't have to do. Nobody's looking over his shoulder to make him do it. And I remember it was frustrating because he had to do it every day. I had to get in there every Saturday and do 7 for the next week or whatever. And I asked him one time about it. He said, I take on projects that force me to have to get something done. And so I tend to do the same thing. I'll take on, no, I don't have time to write this. Dennis, I am amazed at the number of fellow ministers. My preaching friends listen to this. I'm going to out them right now. But Jeff and I both are amazed at the number of fellow preachers we'll have that we'll ask them to write a post, an article for our online magazine, Hope and Expectation, and they will say to us, I just don't have time, I'm too busy.
Wow.
And I just think that is, in one way, I think, I'm so envious of that guy. I wish I could say that. On the other side, I think, there's no way he's as busy as I am. He needs to get busy working,
Right.
So I think you take on projects that force you to work. I try to put deadlines on myself. On my blog, I just don't like for it to be stagnant. I get a lot of encouragement from preachers and friends that say, I read everything you write, and when I go speak somewhere and people are saying, I read what you write, I know then, hey, I better get busy writing.
Yeah.
I also have to remember that, for instance, I've got a project I'm working on right now, and it's a class Bible class material for adults, and I had a church contact me, a little small church over in East Tennessee, that asked, they said, we're starting a young adult class for the first time. We're looking for some material. Can you recommend some sources? And I recommended 4 or 5 to him, and I said, and I'm in the process of writing a book. I told him a little bit about it and everything. He wrote back and said, that's the one we want to use, and we're starting the class in 3 weeks. Oh, well, the book's about 70% through. Well, this is going to force me to have to finish up the project that I've been putting off.
No, you're right. You're absolutely. Well, that's good. That's good motivation right there. One of the other topics that I wanted to brush on today, and while we've got some time here, don't want to rush it at the end, is social media. And I know it's transformed a lot of industries, a lot of businesses, a lot of people. Even 5 years ago, what we do now digitally in our lives is dramatically different. What does? How do you use social media?
Oh, me. I'd love to say I have a love-hate relationship with social media.
You wouldn't be the first to say that.
Yeah, it's it's out there, and I'm really not a fan of it, to be frank. But I think you got to use what's out there and people are home. You got to be where the people are. Yeah. And I was reading this morning an article that a guy wrote talking about self-promotion. Well, self-promotion in the business world, in the political world, in many fields of life, is almost necessary.
Yeah.
If you're going to succeed. But in ministry, self-promotion becomes extremely ugly and dangerous, and might I say even ungodly for those who are in ministry. I can't promote self. And social media tends to want you to promote self.
Right.
And so how do you wrestle and wrangle that beast in? I don't know that I have a good answer. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Google Plus, all those things, frankly, because that's where people are. And if I'm writing something, I've got to believe that it's useful. If it's not, why would I write it?
Right.
And if I believe it's useful, then if one person reads it, it's more useful if 100 people read it. If 100 people read it, it's more useful if 1,000 people read it.
Right.
Well, how's the best way to get 1,000 people rather than one person? All right, write it for one person. I could leave it as a note for my wife on the table by her bed, and she might or might not read it.
Sure.
If I want more people to read it, I've got to get it out there. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Chrome, Google Chrome seems to be becoming more popular for that sort of thing, or where those things are at. So I use it just to get information out there.
When you think about your job and what you've done last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, how has these digital platforms like Facebook and Twitter and so forth, how have they changed your daily and weekly routine?
Man, Facebook can be a wormhole, can't it?
Yes. Yes.
You can end up spending, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day, and in one aspect, Facebook connects us more than we've ever been connected before. Because I can know that, Joe and his family are on vacation because they're posting pictures from their vacation.
Right.
And I don't have to worry about where was Joe Sunday. Well, I know where it was Sunday. It was down at Orange Beach. Good. I'm glad Joe was Orange Beach. Glad he enjoyed it. I don't have to check up on him to find out, how he's doing, other than just say, hey, Joe, I'm glad you had a good vacation. We missed you.
Right.
So that way it does connect us. In another way, a lot of studies are saying it's making us less connected. So I don't really know, but how it's affected my ministry, my work, is it's allowed me the opportunity to keep up with people. Now, here's the downside to it, and some of your folks understand this. Facebook allows you 5,000 friends, 5,000 connections. What do you do when you hit that 5,000? And I did that a while back, and I had 177 requests for friends. And so I turned my Facebook page into a fan page. And I'm mad at Facebook now because it doesn't let me follow and comment as much as I'd like to. Right. So I started a second Facebook account. So now I've got 2 stinking Facebook accounts out there, and I'm not keep up with anything. So there are days when I think I'm going to quit the whole thing. I'm going to put it aside, but then I realize that ends up blessing people's lives and helping people, and I can use it to encourage. Now, Jeff's better at this than I am. Jeff says there's way too much drama and negativity out there. I will only use social media to encourage people to do right.
Yeah.
Good way to do it.
Yeah, no, it is, and there's a lot of uses for that. One thing that when I talk with people about social media, some people really like to have a plan for it, especially in their business world, and some people are like, well, it's just a conversation tool. We'll just use it like that. Do you kind of have a social media plan with your content? So when you write blog posts and all, do you have a kind of a specific plan about how you're going to use social media to get that message out?
I wish I could answer yes to that, but I post when I post.
Well, and I don't think, and I say that not necessarily making it sound like that not having a plan is a bad idea, because I do, preface that by saying that social media is a conversational tool, and I've run into situations before where people overplan their social media usage to the point that they're missing the whole point of the platforms to begin with. So but having said that, I think, that sometimes with strategy as far as a particular time of the day to post or a particular day of the week, that kind of thing, I just didn't know if you had found any success with when you post at certain times of the day for your content.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, I do. I find for some reason Thursday, I try to release something major on Thursday for general audiences, for ministers. For some odd reason, Saturday seems to be the time that you get the most reach. I figure it's because a lot of ministers have a little bit of downtime on Saturday, and maybe they have more time, or maybe they're at their computer in a more relaxed setting, and they're refreshing themselves for Sunday, or putting last-minute touches, or some of them scurrying around trying to come up with something to say. And so whether it's one or the other, Saturday seems to be a good time to post. So I try to release something big on Thursday afternoon, and I try to release something big on Saturday morning before 7 o'clock.
That's pretty good. I like that. Dale, we're getting close on time here. I did want to give you a chance to kind of tell folks about any big projects you're working on, what's coming down the road for you.
Well, I don't know majorly what I can say. I will mention 2 or 3 things. We just began a new program called TJI Shorts, which are short 2 to 3 minute videos of devotional thoughts and spiritual health thoughts that Jeff and I are doing that you can find on YouTube or YouTube channels. We also have 2 or 3 books that are in the cycle right now. One is a book called You, Me, and the People in the Pew. And it's a book that a friend of ours from down in Florida has written. His name is Tracy Moore, and it's a book that deals with personalities in the church and how they get along. That book is probably about 85% through level. The writing's been done now. We're in the formatting stage, final editing stage of it, so it should be out by August. And then I'm working on one right now on spiritual habits. And it's going to be Habits of Spiritually Successful People. That's not a good title, but that's the working title, I guess.
That's awesome.
And it will be out probably again before, my deadline is February of next year, but I'm really hoping I get it out by about October of this year.
That's awesome. That is fantastic. Dale, appreciate the time today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dennis. Appreciate what you're doing with this, and wish you the very best.
And again, that was Dale Jenkins, pulpit minister at Spring Meadows Church of Christ in Spring Hill, Tennessee, just south of Nashville. Wonderful interview. A lot of great stuff, I thought, in that interview today. Learning about the writing habits of successful writers is one of the things that really helps me and has helped my business and helped me grow and get better habits for myself. I found the afternoon writing schedule to be very interesting for him, but if you notice, what really helps him in the afternoon is the work that he does in the mornings. If you think about the inspiration that he gets from the research he does in the mornings, from the visits that he does with people in the mornings, interacting with people, and not, I say interact with people, not sitting there and going through tons of emails and getting your brain bogged down in that and Facebook and all, but spending a lot of time researching in the mornings and then interacting with people during visits can be a very healthy way to really grow and activate your brain and prepare you to ride in the afternoon. So certainly some great habits there. We will make sure we have all the show notes to his website, thejenkinsinstitute.com. Make sure we'll have those in the show notes at crossdig.com so you can get those as well as the apps that he mentioned. There were 3 or 4 in particular: Pages, Full, Write or Die, and Focus at Will. I'll certainly make sure all of that information is in the show notes as well at crossdig.com. But great information there. I can certainly take a lot from that, and I hope you can as well. So that's it for this edition of the Cross Digital Podcast. I'm Dennis Washington. Have a fantastic day. We'll see you next time.